My name is Pastor Don Delaney, and I'm special. And you know, when I started in this ministry, Dr. Hazel gave me a yellow bus. That's how special I was. So I could come to church in a yellow bus. But no, I've been with Victory since we came in 1990. 1990, and I'll tell you, God is good. God is good. That's all I have to say. And we're going to kind of cover a little bit here about my history with Victory. And when I say I'm special, I say that tongue-in-cheek. But the truth of the matter is, we were a special church plant. And, you know, generally, you plant churches that are like your church. But every once in a while, a church plant will be a special church plant that will be a little bit different. And, you know, I need to prerequisite what I'm going to say today is that we are a special inner city ministry called to reach the poor. And not every church is called to reach the poor, but every church is called to leave corners for the poor. And I think, that's exactly the heart of Dr. George and Hazel Hill. When they came to Calgary, they had it in their mandate to plant churches in the four corners and a downtown church. And so, we're talking about streams other than finding streams, financial streams. How many of you like to find financial streams other than your tithes and offerings? That's right. And so it's always good to develop new streams. The way our ministry has done it may not be the same as what because there's lots of business ideas that you can implement. But for us, we had a specific path to raise funds. And we learned a lot along the way. And so traditionally, and you'll see in my notes there, you can read that the traditional church basically has pockets of giving that come for operations, local compassion ministries, world missions, education, capital projects, and evangelism. And so really what we're talking about is because we're a church planting organization, we were an inner city church, and so we basically had to adapt those and stretch those and find some creative ways to bring money in. And it was a learning curve, to say the least. And, I put in point number one there, what's your cause? Really, it's to find a community need and fill it. If you want to get new funds coming into your church, you need to find a community need and fill it. You see, David was facing Goliath. They all saw Goliath. But David said, I'm going to make Goliath my problem. And when you make the community needs your problem, then you will find some solutions. As a matter of fact, I not only made the need my problem, but I made it Dr. George and Hazel's problem as well. I did. Because, I brought a bus load of homeless guys up into the Northwest Church every Sunday morning. And it was exciting. It was exciting at first. No, but it was exciting. When you start to make the world's problems the church's problems, then you start to find some solutions, and it's the solutions that you can sell. You can't sell problems. I know, because I used to sell Chryslers. It was very, very hard to sell Chrysler. You talk about character development. I'll tell you, when I was selling cars for Chrysler, that was character development right there. But the K car. But I learned something actually, in sales. I learned something in sales, and that was when I had a paycheck of $8, I complained to God, and God said, that's how much faith you have. And I thought, okay, I got to fix my own problem. And so I became the best salesman. And right when I hit the top, Dr. George and Hazel started knocking, and I was into ministry. But I'll tell you what, I learned a lesson from that. And when we're talking about taking on the world's problems, we've got to do it with all of our heart. And oftentimes, we see those problems and we think, oh man, we get excited about taking them, and then the Goliath shows up. And a lot of times that's when a lot of ministries quit. and they back down, and they just are in limbo as that Goliath is standing over the church. And it's like they hold us captive. You know, in society right now, their giving to charities is $5 billion a year in Canada. $5 billion. And they say that 20% of that giving is motivated by people that say they go to church regularly. Sorry, 50% of it. 50%. That's great. Because, you know, that tells me that the church is the engine to what's going on in the charity world in Canada. Yeah. But you know what? There's still $2.5 billion that is left untapped, that doesn't have an eternal emphasis. It doesn't have an eternal connection. You know, the church brings eternal solutions, eternal connections to the problems in society. And there's a lot of money out there for the problems. It's just the church should be leading in it, shouldn't it? We should be the ones that are continuing to lead the way when it comes to getting secular money. And so, you know, when we started with our bus ministry, you know, we found out real quick that, you know, it causes problems. You know, and so in some ways it's a good way, but, you know, my second point here is if you're going to go after one of those problems in the world, in the secular, you've got to make it visible and you've got to make it credible. And to do that, what happens oftentimes is that means it's messy and it's a conflict. It's messy and it's a conflict. And you know, when we brought a busload of homeless people up to the Northwest Church, bringing homeless people into a middle-class church is messy and there's a lot of conflict. And you know, we were doing this for, you know, a good couple of months. And it was going great until, you know, there was a few conflicting things that started to happen. I remember one time there was a purse snatcher. There was a girl in the church, and her name was Karen, and she used to be part of the skit team. And she'd make a skit every Sunday. And anyway, she was in the back practicing, and all the guys came in and off the bus, and they were sitting in the church, and she finished her skit, and she started coming towards the sanctuary to where her purse was, and she saw a guy walk by her, and she had a check in her heart. She says, I think he stole my purse. I just got this check in my heart. So she ran to her purse, and sure enough, her wallet was missing. And so she ran back and caught the guy. And he had a Safeway bag with the wallet in it. And there was a tug-of-war going on in the back. And there was almost a fight going on. And so anyway, some people looked around, and they saw Karen and this homeless guy wrestling over this Safeway bag. And the one lady said to other, she said, oh, that's just Karen practicing her skit. Fortunately, an usher, he knew what was going on, so he came over and he got me, and we got the wallet back, and it worked out all right. And then there was another time in the middle of the service, one of the guys from the street just dropped his pants right in the middle of the service. And so anyway, here I am thinking, I go up to the guy and I said, you know, he said, a voice told me to do it. And I said, well, I'm telling you to put it away. So that's all I'm saying. So I'm trying to think of a way to incorporate that, but I just can't. So, but you know what happened? It got to the place where I began to feel like I had to start to police the people that were coming up. And then there was a very well-intentioned organizational thing to kind of rope off the area where the homeless were coming to make sure they got seats because we were growing. But then some of the guys said, I don't want to sit in there because I feel like I'm one of them. You know, sometimes the need can lead you to a place where you're going to either have to quit or you're going to have to pray and find a solution. And a lot of times, you know, if you quit at that time, you will not receive the benefits. Because you know what? God doesn't want to put finances into somebody or some organization that's not ready to carry through to the end and find a solution. That's credibility. We're going to stick with it. We're going to find a solution. And you know, what we did, it was from that point we realized that, you know, you've got a middle-class church vision that's reaching middle-class people with families. They want to bring their kids to church and feel safe on Sunday. And you've got street people coming up that most of them aren't even saved and don't want to be saved. They're there for the sandwiches. It's like mixing oil and water. And so we decided the solution was to plant a church in their environment. Amen. In the downtown. And we found a solution. And I'll tell you, when that started to happen, we got right in to solving a problem that the world had, and that was with homelessness. We started doing houses down in that neighborhood. We went into a drug neighborhood, a dark neighborhood. And I'll tell you, that was an exciting time. And that was very visible. That was very visible. The city started to watch what we were doing. We started renovating houses. We started just seeing conversions start to happen. We had a porn store owner get converted. He shredded $75,000 worth of porn. That was all over. That's right. We had our church service. 10 minutes. Forget it, man. I was 10 minutes into my... Anyway, he's trying to give me a time here. So anyway, I'm getting on there. I better not get into the stories too much, but we were in a downtown area. And you know what? We quickly realized that the need was much bigger than the financial capability of a street church. Especially since our first offering was like $42. And so the Northwest supported us for the first 3 years. But then we began to realize that as we began to share the stories of people's changed lives and we got on the news, we began to attract people. And you know, one thing I learned early is I don't care if people are saved or unsaved. If they're coming to my church, God sent them. But sometimes we do. We say, well, you know what? You can only be involved if you're saved. You know what? I believe in getting everybody saved. But sometimes you just want to sow a seed and get their money saved. You know what I'm saying? Because not everybody's going to get saved. But that doesn't mean they don't want to help your ministry. You know, I remember we had Bob Blair. He was the CEO for Nova Corporation, heard about us. And he called me up one day. He says, I want to come down and see what you're doing. And this was the first high-profile businessman we ever had. Why did he come? Because he saw what we were doing for the poor. He didn't care about that we were at church. And I remember he came down. He came down that day, and just at the same time that he showed up, a disgruntled congregation member showed up. Now, you know, you have disgruntled middle-class people, but when you have disgruntled... And I remember sitting in my office. I had to ignore this girl, and I had told her to wait, and I tried to calm her down. I gave her to Vic to look after. Poor old Vic, he had to put up. So anyway, I was sitting in the office with this high-profile oilman, and he was facing the back window, and I was facing him. And all of a sudden, I hear this thunk, and there's coffee running down my window. That disgruntled congregation member just had waited long enough. And I thought, oh, this guy, first trying to make a good impression, and here he is. He's going to leave. But you know what he did? He just didn't bat an eye. He just kept on listening and asking questions. Then he got his checkbook out. He said, how much do you need? Because he saw the need. And so, we need to be visible. And, if you're visible, God will bring people in and things will happen. And so I'm just going to move along here. You've got to tell the stories of what's going on. And if you tell the stories, then people will hear. And, I noticed with Jesus when he was ministering, he took an offering. And it's interesting where he put the offering bucket. He put it in the temple. I don't think he was the special guest speaker invited by the Pharisees. I don't know. I just got that idea. I don't think they invited him to take an offering there, but he did. Because he basically was saying the church needs to be involved with the problems of the world. And I'm taking an offering. And you know what? I'm taking an offering for what my cause is. What is my cause? To preach the gospel to the poor. And you know what? That's what they said to Paul. Paul said, the very thing I meant to do is to remember the poor. You know what? We all want to preach the gospel, win souls. But one thing that we're also asked to do is to remember the poor. And when you remember the poor, things start to happen. It starts to open up new avenues for you to bring in funds. But along with that, you need to make some changes. And so in we realized that, we needed more money coming in. And so we started a board. Now, and I remember Dr. George telling me, don't start a church board until you have at least 300 people. And I thought, man, at this rate, we're going to be a while. Because, we're targeting the poor. And that's like 5% of the population. So it's going to be a long time before that happens. So what I did was I started a board with Christians and people that didn't go to Victory, but they were strong in character. They believed in our values. They knew we were a Victory church, and I knew them. And I put them on the board. And that was a society board. And so all the monies that came from the outside into the organization and all of the housing and all of the social needs came through that board. And all of the church funds that were there to pay for the pastor stayed within the church. And so you had both in the same vision working interdependently together in the same vision. And it's interesting that a lot of times what happens is if you have a board that is too immersed in the church problems and the church drama, it chokes out your vision. And so here we were. I had the luxury of having a board that was totally separate from the church. And you know what? These were all businessmen. These were all men that knew how. They were men of faith. And they were there to support me and the pastor, myself as the visionary. You need to have, if you're going to reach the secular, you need to be focused on what your mission's going to be, what problem and what solution you're going to bring to some of the world's problems, and get a board that can be focused to doing that. And if they're focused on doing that, you will move a lot faster than trying to get a church board who's worrying about, the water cooler and what Martha did last Sunday, and it all comes into the board meeting. You need to have that separation. And you can see that even with, in the book of Acts there in 6, there was a separation. It wasn't just so they could just read the word. No, it was so that they could pray and figure out the vision that the word was stirring in their heart to go clearly in that direction and not get bogged down with the church stuff all the time. And so often we get bogged down in that. There needs to be that separation. And so another thing here is we need to have that strong governance. I kind of jumped ahead a little bit there. We need strong governments, but you also need to have a financial accountability in the right way and the proper government accreditation to do stuff. The precedent I used was Nehemiah. King Xerxes, he was, of course, took over the whole world and he laid waste to Jerusalem. And after many years, he realized Jerusalem was not productive. And so he wanted to bring some productive to a part of his kingdom that he had conquered. And so he looked around for credible men, and who did he find? Nehemiah. So he said to Nehemiah, hey, I'm thinking I got this place over here. God put it on Nehemiah's heart. I want to go there. And so he gave him government sanction to go and rebuild Jerusalem. It was the housing project of the century. And so not only did he give him the sanction him to do it, but he gave him the lumber and the authority to do it. So he financed the thing. And so here we got Nehemiah. He comes into Jerusalem. He rebuilds the city. But it doesn't then end there. He submitted himself to the ethical oversight of Ezra. So he had a consensual partnership with King Xerxes, and he had the submission under the ethical oversight of Ezra. And so you had two working together. Do you know that the government is a God divine organization? God can use it. And we can use it. And there's a way of doing it. And that moral, submitting to that moral oversight of Ezra meant that the work that was done would be sustained. Because without the moral oversight, nothing lasts. And the government's got lots of programs that they've shown, right? That's why the church needs to be involved. They are looking for the church to be involved. They need that ethical oversight of the church in every project. We need to be in every community. That's why we love to go into the darkest places. I just love Pastor Nathan and Sharon. They've caught the vision so well. They make bigger messes than I ever made. But I'll tell you what. Every time you take on a problem of the world, it's going to be messy. It's going to cause controversy. But I'll tell you what, if you stick with it, there'll be solutions, divine solutions, because you connect it with eternity. Eternity begins to be sown into those communities. Don't be afraid to go to the dark places. And that's what I love about Nathan and Sharon. Don't go anywhere. I mean, we had the prostitution right outside of our church. Most churches complaining about the prostitution. You know what? We started a ministry to the prostitutes. We put a shower in our church and said, come on in and have a shower. We got Jackie looking after that. I think she's, her, and it's just happening. And all of a sudden, there's a solution happening. And God wants solutions for the problems of the world, and He wants to see them come through the churches. And when you go into those places, there'll be finances released. That's why we started out in, 25 years ago with rented facilities. And today we have $10 million in assets, debt-free. Debt-free. That's God. And so I'm going to finish with this, Brad. The last 3 points here is, you need to develop donor-based relations. You need to keep stats and measurable outcomes and have a growth plan. When it comes to developing donors, when we started, I think it was 27 years ago down in Victoria Park, we had a guy, he was a friend of mine, Bruce. He'd come once a year, Christmas, and he put $2,500 into the offering that first Christmas. And I thought, man, we hit the jackpot. $2,500. Bring in the Loomis truck. He has grown and given every single year. He never attended our church, but he saw the work that we were doing. This year, and you've heard about 100-fold. 100-fold. You always hear it preach 100-fold. Did you ever see 100-fold? I'm still waiting. This year, he's given $250,000. You know what? If you will stick through a problem that society has and bring a solution, people will join with you and they will stick with you if you will stick with it. And it will just increase and increase and increase to 100-fold. And now we've got, thanks to Nathan, he's just going crazy planting churches. We got 3 locations in 3 blue-collar neighborhoods, and he's busting at the seams at East Side, and he's on my case to find a building. We have a growth plan. And so we are looking at buying a hotel, another one. And so we just got to get the owner convinced to sell it. Man, he's 85 years old, and he's just living in the past. We're praying for him. We don't know how we're praying for him, to get salvation or die. No, we're praying. But at least we can say, we're praying for you. God's will. Thank you. Thank you. God's will. And you know what? If we can do that, we're just believing for things to happen. So I know I'm probably out of time. I'm out of time? Okay, all right. I'll just give it over there.